Hello, everyone. As followers of Jesus, we need to clearly recognize and realize that the way things are going to be for us is going to be the same as it was for Jesus. In this world, people are very, very conditioned to desire approval and acceptance from other men, especially their peers, but perhaps a larger segment of the population in general. That's not how it was for Jesus. Jesus was treated like a criminal. They yelled, crucify him, and threw him up on a cross and killed him. And Jesus teaches us that we must deny ourselves, take up our cross, and come after him, or we cannot be his disciple. We must take up our cross, or we will not be worthy of him. He teaches us that if we're persecuted, or if we're hated, it's because the world hated him first. And we must remember that when we're following Jesus, it's Christ in us that is that light to the world. And nothing has changed since Jesus walked in Galilee. The world is going to hate him as much now as it did then. And it's going to holler, crucify him, crucify him. If you think about society in general and how it works, we can appreciate how people are conditioned. Take a look at sports stars, football stars, baseball, hockey, basketball, all those guys. We, as human beings, perceive that they are highly valued in the eyes of men because they're paid ridiculous amounts of money. And money represents a value. And so we perceive that in some way they're being highly valued. And they're being applauded, recognized. They have fame. And we think this is a good thing, to desire that. We see this happening all the time in our world around us. And as human beings, we can fall into the trap of thinking, that's a good thing. You know, if any of us could get that, we should grab onto it. Same thing happens with movie stars. Paid ridiculous amounts of money to impersonate other people. That's all they really do. And you think about, some of these roles of movie stars and sports stars, and there's other examples. What value do they really give to society? Not much. Entertainment. Something that's very fleeting. In the days of his flesh, 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked in Galilee, the name for an actor in the Greek language was hypocrite. That's where the word comes from. It meant an impersonator, because that's what an actor is. He's impersonating someone else, whether it's fictional or a real person. He's impersonating someone else. And that's what a hypocrite, when we think of it in Christian terms, when we're using that kind of language, we know that's what a hypocrite is. Someone who appears one way on the outside, but that's not the real, genuine deal. And human beings see that these actors are being paid absurd amounts of money, and so money representing value shows people that these people are highly valued in society. And people start to get the idea that if they could ever end up in the same position as a TV sports star or a Hollywood personality or some kind of celebrity, that they should do it. They should grab onto it. It's good. As a follower of Jesus, that's not good. And my point is not here about, not wanting to be involved in sports or politics or acting or whatever. The point here is that when we follow Jesus, we can't care about the applause of men, or whether we're famous in the eyes of men, or whether we're being recognized by men, not even our peers. The only thing which matters is if we're obeying God and listening to His Son. His Son is the Father's word of truth. We must obey God's word, and God's word of truth is His Son, Jesus. It's a big trap, because what happens is that people are conditioned by this environment. They're seeing these kinds of things with these sports personalities, Hollywood celebrities, famous people who are highly valued by being paid, absurd amounts of money. And so we suppose that, if we don't stop and think about it, that this is a good thing that humans should want, and a natural thing that humans should want: recognition and approval from men. But if you're following Jesus, you're not going to get that. And when you walk through that narrow gate to go down that narrow and difficult road that leads to life, you have to leave all of that at the gate. You have to realize that none of that can matter, and it doesn't matter. Whether your brother or sister, your holier than thou brother or sister, approves of you will not matter. The criminal who has done the most heinous crimes, whether he approves of you or not, also doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it is. The only thing that matters is if you're being approved by God. If you're doing what's pleasing to God, not what's pleasing to men. The only thing that matters is that you fear God, and you do not fear what men think of you. Our only role model is Jesus Christ. That is our role model we follow. That's it. He's the standard. He didn't care what people thought about him. He only cared about one thing. What's my Father thinking? What's my Father want me to do? Remember how he said, I only do what I see the Father doing. That's all Jesus cared about. And men persecuted him. They hated him. They were putting pressure on him all the time. They wanted Jesus to do things their way. The Pharisees were always on his case. But Jesus never relented, ever. He did the will of his Father, period. And when we follow Jesus, that's what we need to do. We need to stop looking around to see if our peers are approving of us. That's what goes on in those churches out there in Christendom. People all want to be approved among one another, accepted among one another, perhaps valued among one another. And that's all they're really concerned about, for the most part. And that's a really big problem if you get caught in that trap. Because you're going to soon forget that the only important thing is that you're obedient to the Lord and doing what is acceptable and pleasing to God. The Father asks us to listen to His Son. On Judgment Day, who's going to be approving us or disapproving of us? God. And all the approvals or disapprovals of any man or group of men on that day aren't going to matter at all, are they? It's not going to matter squat. Nothing. Only one thing's going to matter. Is if we're approved by the judge. It's a very common and dangerous trap to fall into. And it kind of happens in two ways. Some people fear being disapproved by their peers or other men. They fear it. And they fear that more than God. Others don't fear it so much. They just want to be applauded by men, recognized by men. They want to be seen as big shots in the eyes of men. And that's not going to bode well for them either. Think about Jesus again. He picked up his cross. He went through the narrow gate himself. He walked down that narrow and difficult road. He walked the Via Dolorosa. And whatever men thought about him, he didn't care. He didn't care about what was valued in the eyes of men. He cared about what was valued in the eyes of God. And he knew that what was valued in the eyes of men is detestable, revolting, and disgusting in the eyes of God. And we have to keep these things in mind. We have to count the cost. And we have to remember that, God is raising children of character, not spoilt brats who do whatever they want, scampering down the broad road. He's a strict father, but good fathers are strict fathers. And, he wants his children to have character. And we're put through tests along that narrow road. And one of those tests will be men bidding you to seek their approval, just like the Pharisees were always doing to Jesus. And even at one point, Jesus had to say to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Peter had the desires of men in his heart rather than the will of God. We have to appreciate these things and be aware of them, or we're going to fall into that dangerous trap. When we go through that narrow gate, we have to leave all of that behind. We have to realize when we walk through that gate and we start our walk and our journey down that narrow road that leads to life, that we have to completely forget about being applauded by men, recognized by men, and doing what is valued in the sight of men. We can't have that anymore. That's what it means to deny yourself. And Jesus said you must deny yourself. If you want to follow him, you must lose your soul to save it. If you don't want to do this, you can't be his disciple. It's a dangerous trap. And it seems to be a trap that many people really don't recognize. And they're unaware of it. And they fall into it. You see all kinds of people who, label themselves as Christians. And you can easily tell that whatever they're doing, they want recognition from other men. They want applause from men. They want to be seen as great in the eyes of men. It's detestable in the sight of God. Doing that kind of thing is detestable in the sight of God. It's of the flesh. If we don't deny the flesh, we're going to end up in sin. We're going to end up in arrogance and pride and all kinds of problems. We must deny ourselves and be humble before the Lord. Truly humble, not some kind of false humility you try to conjure up. Truly humble. And seek His will. And desire to be approved by God the Father. Because in the end, that's all that's really going to matter. God bless you.